Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and I have Devin with me.
Hey everybody. Hopefully everyone's having a great Lunar New Year.
Oh, that's today.
Yeah, it starts today. Obviously
Oh,
we'll record on the prior, but it starts on the 29th.
oh, okay. That's awesome. So, Devin, have you done anything exciting with Pokemon in the last week?
I mean, I'm building a deck. I have way too many hourglasses for Pokemon Pocket. Um, I mean, I shiny hunt a lot. I mean, I play Pokemon a lot, so that's a very hard question.
Yeah. Well, we had our challenge last week at my local card shop, and it was a fun experience. Went in, decided to play Lapras Dialga.
Mm-hmm.
I did not win. Shocking, I know, but it was fun. I won my first game. I went against a Dragon Ball player, and I was just able to load up my Dialgas my first turn. So I went second, and I was able to get 4 Metal Energy on one Dialga, 3 on another one, and my opponent he had a slow start and wasn't attacking me. So I was able to do the Lapras attack again, and I was just able to just set up really, really quick. So that was fun. And then the second game, I got destroyed by Raging Bolt because they took out my Laprases really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And then I lost my game 3, but it was really close. But it was a fun experience. I was glad I decided to play Lapras Dialga. I've been wanting to play it for a while, like IRL. So it just seemed fitting to play it for that since I gave me that little challenge of not playing any meta. And there's actually wasn't a lot of meta decks at that challenge, so it was really cool to see the diversity.
Good, because I know that's something you and I have been talking about. It's just seeing the same things over and over again does get boring. Not only to try to deck build against, but just it's no fun when you're just practicing the same things over and over again.
Yeah, we had the people that were like obviously trying to go hard for their invite and stuff like that. But my round 3 opponent, I was talking to him. He was like, I actually wanted to play this Crobat deck, but I couldn't find the second Crobat. So I just played Ancient Box instead.
Fair enough. If you can't find the cards, you can't play a deck. I will give him credit for at least wanting to try.
Oh yeah, this was like one of the decks he posted in our Discord. He was like, "Yeah, I really wanted to see it. Like I've been having fun with it on ladder, and I knew you were doing your little challenge, and but it's like at the end of the day, we can only play with it being a premier event. We have to play actual cards. We can't do proxies. So, but it was fun talking to him, and it really was a close round 3. I had game in hand. He was just able to do it before me.
Yeah.
So, but that's our quick update of the week. So, with this week's episode, we're gonna kind of split it up in 3 sections. We're gonna talk about the past, which will be San Antonio Regional that happened this past weekend. We're going to talk about the future, as in Japan. They are in post rotation already, so we'll take a look at their results for the first week of post rotation. And then we're going to jump back into the present, and we're going to start a new series, and we'll go a little bit more into that as we get into that section. But that will also include our rogue deck of the week. So, with that being said, San Antonio happened last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, as we kind of talked about last week, right? It's the last tournament of a quarter, of a format, of an expansion, and it always gets that lame duck status. And it sucks because San Antonio is such a great city. There's a lot of really good players coming from Texas, and it just was in the wrong part of the calendar.
Yeah, typically San Antonio has a December regional. I was kind of looking forward to that. I was really considering going to San Antonio this year. Not mainly for Pokemon, but in Christmas they have the lights decorated on the Riverwalk there, and what I've heard it's so beautiful. And I always wanted to go during that time of the year, But of course, they had to do it 2 weeks after the lights were taken down.
Yeah, I've been to San Antonio, and the Riverwalk is absolutely gorgeous. I didn't go during the winter period or the Christmas period, but that is like I said, it's a beautiful city. So that's why a lot of players probably went there just to enjoy the town.
Oh yeah, I saw photos on Twitter/X of players that dropped midday, and they will be like, "Yeah, I'm just going to explore Riverwalk," and they're like all on like they're showing where they're at, and it looked really nice. So it's one of those really good locations, just not because it's a bit major city, but there is a lot of things to do in San Antonio.
Yes, but let's turn our focus to the tournament results. So there's been a couple of major milestones for this tournament. Like we talked about, it is the end of a quarter. We have our first repeat winner in the North American Series, which means there's one less spot for world invites now because the winner is taking 2 regional win spots.
Yeah,
And
for those who don't know, if you win a regional, you get an automatic invitation to Worlds. So if you win twice, you have 2 of those invitations. So I know Pokemon's trying to make it smaller, so this is one way to accomplish that goal, at least.
oh, they are absolutely happy that the invite got stolen or got duplicated. They are trying to make it very, very inclusive, and those are exclusive, and this is just going toward their goal. And then the other major story for here is that Reggie Drago, yes, had a very heavy appearance in day 2, but did not make the top 8.
They made the asymmetrical. There was one that got, I think the asymmetrical was at top 10. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a win in, and it was with Nicholas Moffat, who is a very good player, very well known player. Um, but I believe he won against, I forgot who he won against. The match escapes me. I watched it a little bit, but yeah, he's the top Reggie Drago in this tournament, and he got top 16. He couldn't even make
Mm-hmm.
it past the asymmetrical.
And I mean, we talked about how Reggie Draco was so dominant, such a good deck, such a consistent deck. But I'm kind of glad that the last event of this format, of this card pool, it honestly, it had a lot of diversity. The top 8 had 7 different archetypes, so it wasn't too bad. And I say 7 different archetypes. Realistically, you could argue there was 7 different decks, really, because the Gardevoirs, I think, had 2 different kind of philosophies. But other than that, like, it was really a show of the positiveness of the meta, where it can be diverse as long as you know your matchups, compared to last last tournaments where it was very, very heavily densely populated with the same 2 or 3.
Yeah, I remember just a month ago at Toronto, 6 of the 8 were Reggie Dragos, and I'm sitting at the airport waiting for my flight, and I'm pulling up. I'm like, oh, I wonder who made Top Cut, and I'm like, is this right? Like, how? But at the same time, it's Reggie Drago. It's powerful. It's OP.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad to see the diversity in the top 8. It's been a while since we had that. Um, I also want to say shout out to James Kowalski playing the Pidgeot Control. If those who know who he is a very well-known YouTube content creator, and he finally got his break. He was trying to break out of the online tournament bubble and show that, like, yeah, I'm just not someone that plays the game online. I can actually do this in real life as well.
Yeah, and then there was 2 decks in day 2 that caught my attention. Well, one caught your attention, but I found this other one. So in day 2 was the No Energy Conkeldor.
Oh yeah,
That was a cool scene. It got streamed during day 1, right?
yeah. It went against a Reggie Drago deck, actually. No, not Reggie Drago. It went against Palkia Trapgos, and it got destroyed on stream. But it's a bad matchup because you don't play the Actually, no, he does play Manaphy. He just couldn't get the Manaphy out, and he kept on getting like Moonlight Shuriken because the timber is only 80. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
But the
And the go ahead.
I was gonna say, but the player did make day 2 with it. He got, I'm looking it up right now, 116th, so top 128. So not a bad showing from this player. And I was
Yeah,
excited for this deck because this is our very first rogue deck of the week when we first started this podcast. So seeing this go from just a meme deck to it can actually do well in a tournament is very, very cool.
yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in the list, definitely go check the first episode of the podcast, episode chapter 1 or season 1, episode 1. If you're just wanting to see what the list is entailing. And then the other list that caught my attention in day 2 was in 45th place, so a top 64 list. It was an Entei V deck where the whole point of the deck is Area 0 Underdepths, put a Teal Mask in play, put an Entei in play, fill up your bench with everything, and just hit hard with Burning Rondo.
Yeah.
So,
I first saw this deck on stream for a Champions League, actually. They were showing this, and I thought it was weird at first. But with the Teal Mask, Ogerpon, and the Entei V having a colorless attack cost, it really makes a lot of sense of how you can power it up because you can just use the. Oh, actually, no. I thought I played Magnum Basin. It does not. You just have
no,
how do you
this
get
list
that
runs.
energy on there?
Yeah, so this list is very much a Teal Mask is probably the primary attacker because it has more grass and fire energy, but it has enough fire energy where you could stream 1 or 2 Enteis very comfortably. And you kind of have 2 different attackers. You have the Teal Mask, which will attack based on amount of energy in the active spot on both sides. And then if your opponent just doesn't have enough energy where your math makes sense, you can just switch it up with an Entei V and just do damage based on how big your board is because you're running that Area 0 up Underdepths. You have a Teal Mask in play, so you can get a bench of 8, and you can really hit really big numbers with either attacker. You run the Mew EX to refill your hand to 3 with the restart ability. You have the Latias EX that gives all your basic Pokemon free retreat, and you don't run anything but basics, so that is great.
Yeah.
And then you have all the standard support mons, and then your Radiant is Radiant Charizard, which you run to fire energy, so why not?
Yeah.
So
I remember how this deck really works now. It's you play 4 energy switch. So that's how you can power up an Entei in one turn. You do a manual attachment and then do Teal Dance and then energy switch it back to the Entei and then hit for big numbers. So I'm glad that this made an appearance and a strong appearance too.
yeah, top 64. It's and I saw that I'm like, is that oh wow, okay, and I looked into it, I'm like, it makes sense. It has grass attack, it has fire attack, so it hits 2 major types. It hits the Charizards for weakness, it hits the Archeralodon decks for weakness. It can go toe to toe Regidrago because they love having energy on the play. Well, your Teal Mask loves seeing that. So it's a really good deck. It's a very good meta call, and it honestly it takes a lot of what we're gonna talk about with our deck building series into practice. Like this is a really good deck to kind of go back and be like, oh, where does decision making come from? We're using this. We're just talking about this Entei Teal Mask deck, and we kind of talked about, okay, this person's probably thinking all these things.
Yeah.
So it's really, really cool to see that.
But everything else is typical things. Regidrago, Charizard, Lugia. Archaludon made another strong appearance. It's kind of making its name known out there in the format. And honestly, it just gets stronger with the next format with the Bidoof coming out, and it's basically Bidoof proof. So, anything else for San Antonio?
No, I mean it looked like a very fun regional to be at and watch. I'm excited to see how players are going to turn the corner with the new set becoming standard legal, and it's going to be a very interesting next 2 to 3 months while we are waiting for this future format that we're already getting to see the results of in Japan. So it's going to be an exciting next 3 months in Pokemon, I think, in the TCG game for sure.
Yeah, so with that, we're gonna talk about the city leagues over in Japan. This weekend, they actually went to their own post rotation, so they're already in the format that we will be in, starting with the Atlanta Regional. So with that, the all yellow border cards are now expanded. They rotated. We can't play with them unless there's reprints in the Scarlet Violet series. So with that, we're looking at some of what what players have thought about trying to experiment during this fresh new format, and there's a lot of interesting decks that has won city leagues.
Oh, I am excited. I was going through because the city leagues are very big tournaments, yes, but the amount of city leagues that happen the same time that these regional San Antonio regionals happening, like I was going through, there's almost 2 pages of results that you could pick from.
Oh yeah,
It's phenomenal. I love it.
and of course you see like some of the same things that carried over that just didn't need to rotate, but there's a lot of new decks. One deck that caught my eye that I'm like, wow, I can't believe this. I'm seeing a lot of this is Aegislash.
Yes,
So it's
and I that wall archetype is definitely showing more emphasis now that a lot of the cards, like especially the V's, have rotated.
Yeah, I remember going on Twitter on Saturday or Sunday, and someone posted the first several results have been recorded for city leagues, and they're like, yeah, out of the first 5 tournaments, 3 were won by Melodic Stall.
Mm-hmm.
But as you go through the rest of the things, it's more diverse than we thought. But I've been eyeing this Aegislash deck for a little bit. Me and John actually talked about trying to play this at one point, but we couldn't get it going. But I think this is a nice format to try to bring this back up so that this may be a future rogue deck of the week. Are there any other surprises that you saw with Japan?
I mean, to me, I just love the diverse deck choices, the willingness to experiment, the willingness to take risks. Like I said, there was 2 pages of tournaments, and no 2 tournaments had a very similar top cut or top 4. There's like a couple decks that caught my eye. Was one, you were right. Mammoth Spine EX is a good card.
I'm kind of
It's having
surprised by that.
success. It's having success. Um, Another fun deck I saw that I cannot wait for us to get is there was this Whale Lord Baxcalibur deck
Really?
that did all right at a deck. Yeah, I mean it got 11th at a tournament, but still that's still a great showing. I'm looking at it, and the Whale Lord does a damage based on how many water energies are attached to it, but its attack cost is a minimum of 4. But it's a stage 1 of 240 HP with it's a non-rule box, so it's like if you knock this out, you're only getting one prize for 240 damage. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Another deck that I saw just because we have profiled it in the past is Cellular Edge EX. It's had a Drillbur from Temporal Forces, and I can't believe that we never thought about this card when we were building it. The Drillbur has an ability called Dig, Dig, Dig. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto the bench, you may search your deck for up to 3 basic fighting energy and just discard them. So this deck runs 10 fighting energy and 3 Drillbur, and it runs a 4/3 line as Ceruledge, and it just has 7 fire and 2 darkness energy because it has a Monkey Dory support. And you just put the Drillbur into play from your hand, so you can't Nest Ball it. But it's one of those, oh my god, like how this is synergy. Like how is this now just seeing play?
I
And
actually,
the deck only
yeah,
costs $30.
I actually saw that card initially, and I'm like, oh, I was actually hype on Drillbur when I was going to build Cellar Edge. I actually found all my Drillburs and I had it out, but then people slowly like convinced me like, oh no, it's not the play. It's a bench sitter. It's an easy KO. Like why would like Palkia is just better. But with Palkia rotating, you need another card to synergize with that deck, and Drilbur is a nice replacement for sure.
Yeah, it's no Simisear V-Star, but
Yeah.
it's a good replacement. So like I said, there's a lot of archetypes that just got me super excited. It's just I just love the creativity. I really do, and it kind of brings a smile to someone who does not like playing meta. And I've seen that. I just wish and I hope that with the rotation, when it happens, we get some of that experimentation with it as well. I really hope more players try to take risks, especially in the beginning, on kind of seeing what cards are good, what cards are bad.
Yeah. I'm I'm surprised on seeing the lack of the partner Pokemon. I honestly thought all those decks were super powerful.
Now,
You do see them, but they're not as prevalent as I thought they would be.
I would say Iono's partner Pokemon are probably making the biggest impact right now because it's so flexible. I saw the Kilowattrel and the Belly Bolt partnered up with Raging Bolt. I've seen it as his own standalone archetype. I've seen it paired with Miraidon. It's those partnered cards from the Iono side is becoming very flexible. Zoroark is being used as a draw engine instead of as a main attacker, but the end archetype is still kind of there. And then when I was going through the list, I saw some fun little plays with the end Zacian.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of Archaludon pairings with it.
I saw a deck where it didn't even run. It was a support to some other engine. I can't remember because I was going through everything so quickly. Didn't run a single metal energy. I think the deck ran like 4 total energy, period. So the whole goal was you just attack for free using the Topps Choice Band and Potswick and kind of just pick and poke. I'm
Yeah,
like, that's genius.
yeah, and it's the two prizer is hard to KO with that, and you can literally start attacking first turn. You don't have to worry about having an energy cost. You just need playing Arven or even just a town store
Mm-hmm.
and try to get those pieces to attack. But yeah, uh, I'm excited to see how rotation is like. Atlanta is our first major tournament that will have rotation, which is a quote unquote local regional for our area. So a lot of our players will be going up there. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend. I have some other commitments that I already made. But I'm excited to watch it at home and talk to my friends, see how they're preparing for this. And yeah.
Yeah, and for reference, the Atlanta Regional is that second weekend in April. It's the first full week of in April, so it's early April. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's still a lot of time. There's still 3 full months from when we're talking now to when that tournament is, and there's still a whole format in between. So
Yeah.
we don't want to overlook the current format. We want to give Prismatic Evolutions its due. Its due. It's definitely a set that has been given plenty of ice for probably some of the wrong reasons, but it does have some very fun cards in it, and it's going to be a fun format in between before we see those partner cards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with that, we can go to our main topic for today's episode. And we're going to start a new series. Me and Devin were talking between the two episodes, and we kind of realized we are a rogue deck Pokemon trading card game podcast. And lately, we've been talking about deck building a lot. We I've went through on that journey last week, and Devin is going through this right now, getting ready for all our videos and some future projects that we have in the pipeline. So we wanted just to start this little series on how to build decks because you don't really see that a lot nowadays.
No, and I think in this day and age where everything is so accessible, It's so easy just to go on to Limitless, go on to PokeBeach, go on the YouTube, go on to Twitter, and just key search a deck or look at the top 8 of a tournament and be like, which list do I want to pick? Let me buy those cards off TCG Player and then just play it. And you're just copying and just trying to duplicate the success of other people. Not saying net decking is bad. I don't want to say that. I think there is some really good parts of net decking when it comes to research and inspiration points. But I think the art of deck building has lost its way, and there's a lot of players nowadays who struggle building decks because they don't understand the art of it. They think it's more of a science.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I net deck a lot. Um, Honestly, when we first started this podcast, we were net decking all the rogue decks of the week. Like we weren't making these on our own. Um, and like we said, we're not bashing that. We're both of us. We work full time. We don't do Pokemon as our main gig. This is a hobby for us. So sometimes you just don't have the time to create a deck from scratch and make it to a competitive level. But if you do have time to think of a fun deck or a interesting way to play the game, we want to encourage and empower that. So, with this week's topic, with deck building, the first thing we need to do is figure out what deck we want to play.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that, the first question you should be asking yourself is, what do I want the main actor of my deck to be? What do I want my main focus of the deck? So, Dean, let me ask you this question. When you are looking at a card or looking at a deck that you want to build or play, what do you look at in terms of the main focus of the deck?
So, when I create a new deck, honestly, it depends on how I feel in that moment and the reason why I want to create that deck. So, for instance, last week when I did Oinkologne, I saw Oinkologne a year ago when it first came out, and I thought something about this card just seemed appealing to me, and I thought it was interesting. It had a high HP, it was colorless, and I also knew it had the right amount of support in the format with Sharon's Care and other colorless things. And I knew I'm like, okay, I think I can make this work. Other times, I'm building a deck just because I think the Pokemon is cool. I built a Scizor deck. Scizor is my favorite Pokemon. I know it's not a strong deck. I know it's not good, but because I like that Pokemon, I wanted to try to see if I can make this work and have fun with it. And then a lot of times I just see a card and I'm like, oh, that has like an interesting ability or an interesting effect of an attack. Can we partner it with some other things and make this a strong deck?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, there's a couple cards in the future set, this Journey Together set that I'm like, this is going to be really cool. And I'm using my mental power now to think about 4 months from now when I can physically get this card in my hand, how can I make this be a good functioning deck? But when I look at a card, a lot of times when I'm trying to build a new deck or build something to kind of give me a new motivation, I just look at a card of like, this has a cool concept. Let's build it.
Yeah.
Let's build around it. Let's put the structure around it. Let's see if it can do well. And a lot of times, it's not going to be, one, it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. I don't care how long you've been deck building. You have to tweak. You have to kind of do a handful of games, figure out, oh, this is where it struggles. Let me make this a judgment. Deck building is an art. Like we said, it's not a science. It's always going to be a little bit of tweaking. It's always going to be a little bit of, oh, maybe after a day or so, you kind of reevaluate yourself. And Dean and I can run the same deck, and we'll play it very differently because we have two different philosophies of how we like playing the game. So that's another thing you have to understand about yourself is when you're building a deck, what do you like to do? And you build a deck around your preferences more than what is sometimes optimal.
I think a good example of this is if we're looking at the professional sense, is Sander Wojcik up in the EU region. He is known to be a godfather of control decks, and he never plays meta. I don't even say he plays counter meta. He is known to play these control like style decks, and it's nothing you've ever seen before. Every time he's gone to a major regional, it is some sort of creation that he just put his time and effort in, and he always make days two with it. He always does really well with it, and he just sees the card pool in a different way than we do. But he sees like, okay, how can I make X card work? And he just uses his imagination. And I'm sure he has gone through a lot of drafts of that deck before he brings it to a tournament. But no one's expecting it, and that also plays a very important role too, because when you play these homebrew decks, no one knows that deck other than you. So you have a leg up on the competition in one sense as well.
Yes, absolutely. So now that we kind of established why sometimes we pick a card, let's also look at other factors when it comes to picking the star of the show, right? So when you're making a deck from scratch, there's a couple factors you need to take into consideration. Is this deck going to be considered what is meta? And I know we defined meta in the first episode of the podcast with you and John, but for those who are kind of getting caught up or being maybe introduced to this channel afterwards, meta is a term. It's a slang that stands for most effective tactics available. So if when we say a deck is meta, it's because it's getting popular results, it's getting consistent results, and it just has a high share of the usage pool. So it's something you have to take into consideration when either you are building a deck or picking a deck.
Yeah, and that's something just simple research will do. As we mentioned before, the Pokemon trading card game has a lot of easy resources that you can just type in. We use Limitless a lot. I also have my pulse on the competitive environment as I continue playing in all these tournaments. And you get to see what the top players are playing and how well they're playing. And we don't want to confuse most popular with meta. For higher tournaments, most popular is most likely meta, but those are not two terms that are one-on-one with each other. You want to see what is doing well and how the top players are playing with or around those decks.
Mm-hmm. And then, for the purpose, obviously, we call ourselves a rogue podcast. So rogue really is, again, there's no official definition of what is rogue, but it is another slang term that the community uses to define decks that are not considered meta, that are not going to be seen a lot. Another way of calling a deck rogue is a homebrew, because you're sitting at home and you're playing Dr. Frankenstein and kind of figuring out what's going to be your science project kind of deal. So with these principles, these philosophies can be applied to any deck, any card game really. And we just want to kind of put that out before we really started going deep into the conversation of some terms we kind of been throwing out a lot lately. Kind of going back to definitions, going into now deck building philosophy, and really going to move forward over the next couple weeks and really kind of talk about this art of what it is to play a deck and build a deck for you to have success at the tournaments or your leagues that you're going to be happy with.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, do your own research. Know also what format that you want to build a deck for. Most of the time, we are talking about the standard format, which is the last more or less 2 years of the card's release. But Pokemon does have other formats that you can play. There is an expanded format that does have some banned cards, and the card pool starts with the black-white era all the way to today. There's some fan-made formats like Gym Leader Challenge, and that itself has a meta with it as well. So if you want to build something that's unique, you need to figure out, okay, what are the decks I'm seeing the most of? What decks am I seeing have high success rate, and how can I either counter that or play something that can do well against it?
Absolutely. And again, this can also apply if you like TCG or you are playing Pocket. These philosophies can go into building the deck in Pocket. Now, mechanics are different. We're very well aware of that. When you look at the philosophies and kind of your approach to deck building, there's a lot of parallels between the two games, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is also with looking at. I know we keep saying you need to do your research and look at the meta decks and the archetypes and all that, but there's a reason why these decks are doing well. So if you can understand why those decks are doing well, you can bring the same principles and philosophies to even a homebrew or rogue deck. Not necessarily saying we have to use those same cards, but the synergies and the different combos that meta decks use to be successful, you can find something similar to any deck that you want to build.
Yes. So we talk about what is meta. We say do the research. Let's talk about the meta, right? Let's talk about what in this that we are going to a new format because a new set got released. Dean, what would you consider maybe the top 2, top 3 decks in this current standard format that we are living in right now?
So with Prismatic Evolutions, I would say the top 2 decks are Dragapult and Gardevoir.
Okay.
And if you look at the Play Limitless online tournaments, those are the top 2 decks that you see as well. And part of that is that they have a early game strategy that they both have in common that slows down your opponent's gameplay.
Okay. And then other decks that you should consider when deck building would be what?
Lugia Archeops is a very strong deck right now. Has the introduction of the new Regigigas, which for 4 colorless energy, you can do 330 damage to a Terra Pokemon. Another deck that everyone should know about is the Charizard deck. That's always powerful. The ability is super strong and doesn't necessarily get nerfed too much with the introduction of prismatic cards. It's just a different way of playing around that deck. And then 2 newcomers to the scene is Archaludon, as we saw it making its appearance last couple weeks. And then Celluledge is actually making its appearance as well in this format because of Bidoof, really. That card in itself is really changing the format a lot. Even though it's a very small Pokemon, it just has such a huge impact though.
Yeah, absolutely. And that card's going to it's going to shift a lot of deck building too. So, now that we have an idea of what the meta is or even decks we have to be very very aware of and cards we have to be aware of, let's apply that to the rogue deck of the week for this week.
Yeah.
So we're talking about who do we want to be the main actor of the deck. Well, this week we're going to be doing a Leafeon EX deck. So Leafeon EX is a stage 1 evolution of Eevee. It can evolve from either Eevee or Eevee EX. It has 270 HP. It is a grass type. It is a Terra Pokemon. And it has 2 different attacks. The first attack is Verdant Storm. It has 60 times the amount of energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So it definitely loves playing against Lugia. Definitely loves playing against Regidrago. And then its second attack is Mossa Gate. This one is a grass, fire, water. It does 230, but also heals 100 from every single one of your Pokemon. So the healing can counter Dragapult, those damage counters, or spread archetypes. So that is the main actor of this deck. So the reason why I got gravitated toward this card is that we kind of talked about it, right? In theory, has a good matchup in terms of damage going back and forth with Lugia, Regidrago. It can counteract part of what Dragapult does with the damage counters. It is a grass type, so it hits Charizard for weakness. So it, in theory, when you're looking on paper, it goes, all right, this could be very well positioned. This could be fun. You could have fun matchups with it. You could take some unexpected games with it because not everyone knows what Leafeon does.
Yeah, and with my early playtesting with it, it is fun. And I even had a couple of my opponents scoop within the first turn or two, because as soon as you set up, it's really hard to stop what Leafeon does. It just goes against a lot of the meta cards in so many different ways, because you're either doing the first attack, which is for the energy flood decks, like we said, for Archaludon, Lugia, Gardevoir, if we can get lucky enough, Miraidon. All those they play a lot of energy on board, and you can take advantage of that. And then the other attack, you can still hit hard and then heal all the damage that your opponent has done to you, like the Dragapults, the spread decks, the Monkey Dory focus decks. You can basically negate those as well. So the spread of your matchups are favorable to even, in my opinion. You don't have a lot of unfavorable matchups in theory.
Absolutely. So the way I went with the rest of the build of this list is I went with a non-supporter based draw engine. And I'm doing that because I wanted my supporters for turn to be either be my search, either energy search or my item search. So with that, we run 2 Teal Mask Ogerpons. With the Teal Dance, we get do a free attachment, and we get to draw one.
Mm-hmm.
We run a 2/2 line of Bibarel, so we can refill our hand up to 5. And then we run 1 Fezandipiti EX, so if we do suffer a KO, we can draw 3, we flip the script, and be able to refill that hand and restabilize. And the Radiant of choice for this deck is Charizard. Now, I could be very well convinced to put Greninja in this deck.
I would say,
and it would work.
I would say if you want to go with the healing aspect as well, Radiant Serena could be an option as well.
Yeah, so that Radiant spot, there's a lot of flexibility. The Charizard, I wanted a big beefstick kind of end game attack with they pretty much be for free. But the Serena, the Greninja, very good, like very, very good calls as well. The problem is you can only get 1 Radiant slot, so sometimes you have to make a hard decision.
Yeah, and then with the Pokemon lineup that we have, I know we mentioned that we have Teal Mask Ogerpon in this list, and people may be asking, I thought you're making a rogue deck. Why do you put in a card that is so strong that's meta? As I mentioned before, we can borrow ideas from meta decks and put them in road decks, and there's some cards that you can't ignore. So for a grass deck like Leafeon, Teal Mask Ogerpon is such a smart call because it is a draw engine and it can be in a backup attacker all in the same time.
Absolutely. And when you make a deck, you can't ignore good cards. Like, if you don't want to play Regidrago, that's fine. But there's cards in Regidrago everyone else will be using because they're good support pieces. They're good supporting actors. Teal Mask here is a beautiful supporting actor who sometimes can take a lead role for an episode or two. Yeah. He doesn't always have to be sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, and we'll go into that more next week. With this series that we're going to do, we're going to talk about a different aspect of building a deck from scratch, and we're gonna be ending the series with actually building one on the podcast too, and kind of give our thought processes on how we make a deck and why we pick certain cards. But with today's focus of like what is the archetype, what is the identity of your card, we want to pick something that was interesting. And with prismatic evolutions, the evolutions are the main stars of this set. So we thought it was perfect. Like, let's just focus on the evolutions and see how we can make them shine in a format that may drown them out a little bit, especially from the beginning when these cards were first introduced. They didn't have the most pizzazz. They didn't have a lot of people talking about them. So we wanted to just do our due diligence and see how can we make them a star when they're getting outshined with cards like Bidoof or Regigigas or Black Belt Training.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of round out the Pokemon, we talked about Leafeon can evolve from either Eevee or Eevee EX. This deck does run 4 Eevees, but it runs the 50 HP boosted evolution Eevee. So if this Pokemon's in the active, the first turn you play it, you can evolve. So you could go from Eevee to Leafeon EX, same turn. And there are so many ways, or really the main way for us is Crispin is going to be the main accelerator if you want to try to do a double attachment in a single turn. But we run a whole bunch of other cards in the deck that kind of builds to that consistency engine. So we do run 3 bug catching sets. We run 2 Earthen Vessels. The reason why for Earthen Vessels is because we do run 3 different types of energy. You need 3 different types of energy for Leafeon's secondary attack. Glass Trumpet makes sense. We're running a lot of normal types. Eevee's a normal type before it evolves. We have the Bibarel line. We are always going to have a Terra in play because you always want to have a Teal mass, so it makes sense. Nest Ball, Night Stretcher, Super Rod, Ultra Ball. So you have Ball Search, you have your recovery. You're never going to feel like you're out of resources. Stadium of choice for this deck is Area 0 Underdepths. If we could have a very big bench, have multiple draw engines in play, multiple ways to just to get our card hand refilled, it would be great. Our support line is Arven, Boss's Orders, and Crispin. Like we said, we're not trying to focus on draw with our supporters. When we play our supporter, we want to search for something. We want to thin that deck out. We want to give ourselves better chances on the draw from the Pokemon-based draw. That way we're doing multiple things a turn. And then the A-spec of choice is a Sparkling Crystal, and it does run a TM Turbo Energize to kind of help with that turn 1 setup. And then we run 8 Grass, 3 Fire, 2 Water. Normally we don't go through a full deck list when we're talking about a rogue deck, but we're going to be doing that when we talk about the decks during the series of deck building, because we want to talk about the reason why we have the spreads we do, the reason why we're going the way we want. We want to show our logic and our philosophy when it comes to building decks and explaining why we have the ratio in which we do. Not having a deck with any professor, researcher, or Ionos to a lot of people is like, whoa, what are you doing? But we took a different approach when it came to draw. So we basically said, all right, we're going to Pokemon-based draw. We're going to use our supporters for a different role instead of just filling our hands up. And we're going to let our items do the work. Knowing that Bidoof's in the format, we're going to have to play around with that. But if we can get around the Bidoof, which is not as hard as people think it is, we can have a good, fun match with our opponent.
So yeah, obviously when we build a deck from scratch, we have a lot of cards we can pick from, and there are different options, both Pokemon and Trainer, that we didn't have room for in this list. So we also want to try to just take a little bit to identify some optional text that you may want to put in for a deck like Leafeon. Since we are playing a Terra heavy deck, the Noctowl line is always a good option if you feel like you want to play that. When you play the Noctowl with the Jewel Seeker ability, it helps you grab any 2 trainer cards So you can cherry pick, and then basically it's a Pidgeot quick search at home. You can only use it once, but it gives you what you need at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Another card that I was considering for this list is Buddy Buddy Poffin. We do run 2 Pokemon that are essential to our main strategy with Bidoof and with Eevee. And right now, all of our search is only a 1 Pokemon target. With Buddy Buddy Poffin, you would be able to set up multiple. So that is a card that I was considering. I just couldn't find the right ratio to put that in.
And then
Um,
I say a supporter that you could use in this deck that you don't really see a lot is Gardenia's Vigor. So what Gardenia's Vigor is, you draw. I can't remember how many cards. Doing some research on the fly, but it is a supporter. Sorry, I'm trying to spell Gardenia. Gardenia.
So Gardenia Vigor is a supporter that reads, draw 2 cards. If you drew any cards this way, attach up to 2 grass energy cards from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. So that could be another version of acceleration. It can be a version of draw support because the draw 2 is always great. And it does work with the deck because we do run so many grass energies.
And grass Pokemon, so it'll be a way for you to power up either your Leafeon or your Teal Mask, and hope that be something on the bench, and or at the very least you can set up Pokemon that you can easily retreat from, because sometimes you need a pivot, and since we don't play any Pokemon that have a free retreat, it's okay to use up resources to kind of bail you out of situations.
Mm-hmm. This deck does not actually mine energy in the discard pile. It does run 2 Night Stretchers. So if it's sitting in the discard pile, it's still very much a resource. It also has Glass Trumpet, which means we want the energy in the discard pile because that's how you can accelerate with Glass Trumpet. So using your attachment for turn to retreat and put that energy in the discard pile actually does more good than harm in this case because we do not mind living out of that discard pile.
Yeah, so some other considerations for this deck, and feel free to take this deck, modify it the way you want, but what are some drawbacks of this deck? Obviously, this is not something we're seeing on the competitive circuit right now. What is something we need to be aware of when we do play this on the ladder?
So one thing that you have to be very much aware of is the fact that your opponent's going to try to stare down those EVs before and not even give you an opportunity to become a Leafeon. There's plenty of ways in this current format to take out 50 HP. So if you want to switch the Eevee to be the one that has 70 HP, I would not blame you. I went with the ability one because I wanted to be a little more aggressive turn 1 and be able to just turn onto an Eevee really quickly. Another thing to really just be aware of is that your opponent will try to just pick apart your support engines. Taking out the Bidoof by, or even taking out the Bibarel by waiting out the Bidoof because I know they probably can't damage it when it's on the bench, and them just letting you kind of sit with either a Leafeon or a Teal Mask in the active attacking, and they just pick apart everything around it, and they can take multiple prizes several different ways. There's a lot of different decks that can just take multiple prizes in a turn now. And I would say the last other pitfall would be sometimes you do have awkward starts. You're not always going to start the Eevee. That's the dream. You're going to start Teal Mask. That's the dream. But I've started with Radiant Charizard more than I would like to admit, even though it's a 1-card Radiant in my deck.
I feel like that happens to me more often than not. It's like, oh, I only play a one of this card, and I start with it majority of the time. I don't know why, but that's the reality. I would say another pitfall of this deck, it kind of goes with what you said with having an awkward start. Because we don't have the draw supporters, our supporters are more for setting up, we're not going to be able to get the resources that we need at any given time unless we're really lucky, or if we just keep our resources in our hand and we don't get disrupted. So that's something to keep in mind when you play against a more established deck, they're more consistent than what we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, by no means do I think my list right now is fully optimized. Like I said, there's some cards I'm wanting to switch here and there. I just haven't had enough time to put into the deck to really be like, this is the finished product. I think this is definitely still in like draft 1.5, draft 2 range. Like I probably would, if I was thinking about going to a cup, I would probably need another 2 weeks with this list to really try to optimize it just to where I'm comfortable with the ratios. But
Yeah.
that's again part of the deck building process. We're not gonna always just pump out decks that we find that are completely optimized. We want to show the ups and downs of deck building especially when it comes to rogue or off the wall ideas or homebrew ideas. That there is a process. Like we said, this is an art. This isn't a science. So you have to play around. You have to put the effort in. You're gonna have to put nights and weeks into testing your little pet deck so until you feel 100% comfortable taking it to a challenge or a cup.
Yeah, with when I did Lapras Dialga, like I played that online, tweaked it a little bit. I did neck deck it from a YouTube content creator, but I've changed it a little bit then to kind of make it a little more consistent, and I was comfortable enough like, okay, this I feel like I'll have a good time at a challenge with it, and I brought it last week and I did win. I won against a top my first round was against a top deck. Obviously I had my downfalls with it, but don't be afraid to change stuff out. I know I get flack from my friends all the time because I never show up to a challenge with the same 60. I'm always changing something because I want to see what works and what doesn't. And for me, I need that pressure of a tournament to really see if the deck works. So that's why I do that for challenges. I'll add like one or two cards, change something here and there, and see if it can perform under pressure.
Absolutely. And it's just going to be one of those things that you're going to have fun with a deck. Hopefully, you find a card that you really gravitate toward, and you get to go on the journey with the card together for months in multiple formats and be able to build it up and be able to adjust with the sets that come out. I think the beauty of what kind of the end goal of this series is we're going to look at a card or some cards from the Journey Together set. Where one, it's post rotation, so it's going to be the freshest thing from in a rotations format. And two, you're going to be able to play these cards for 2 full years. So if you find a card or a philosophy from a set like that, that's a set that's very well positioned to where it can reward you for 2 years. And it can help you, and you can just build and adapt with it over time. And again, from a budget perspective, that's always great for newer players or players who are trying to be more cost effective with their play.
And I would say, don't be afraid to keep with an interesting idea for a long time. I know there's that pressure that like, oh, I should just play something that I'm seeing online that is doing well and just switch to that. But as you get comfortable with new cards that are being introduced into the format, and as you get comfortable with the deck that you create, one, it becomes more fun because it is your deck. It's something that you invested your time, your blood, your sweat, your tears into. And then when you actually play in tournaments, you have a little bit of advantage because you know your deck really well and they're going to be reading that card multiple times most likely during that match, and you're just sitting there knowing your strategy, and you can do stuff that your opponent may not think of just because you spent the time perfecting it and getting comfortable with a certain list. Even if it's not the quote unquote optimized list, it's optimized for you, and that's what's the most important.
Absolutely. They sound like me when I was getting you into the game.
Yeah. Well, it's like
This is the exact talk him and I used to have years ago when he was first getting into the game. And I was like, just find something you love. Surprise, the element of surprise will buy you at least one turn in a match.
oh yeah.
Oh,
Uh I would say a good example is me with the cloth deck. I've been playing that for over a year now, yes, it is now considered a meta deck, but I started it when it was a meme. And I just brought it to a tournament as a joke with my friends, and I won 2 challenges back to back. And then I brought it to Charlotte, and it was still considered a meme deck, and I made day 2 with it. And I just kept on playing, and I got super comfortable with that list. And then last month or 2 months ago in Toronto, I brought the Cloth Trapgoes list, and I was just super comfortable because I've been playing this archetype for over a year now.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of wrap up today and kind of hopefully give everyone optimism for the future. One, we're going to put a video out for the Leafeon EX. If you want to know a little bit more about it, we're going to have a video that's going to drop on Friday after this podcast drops. So if you want to look into Leafeon and kind of see how I am building the deck and some of my logic a little bit more, we go into into the detail there. We do a couple matches with it. 2, do not be afraid to pick a card because you like it. Definitely have fun with deck building. Understand that you are the artist and that you're going to just do things a little differently than myself or Dean. But we hope that this series over the next month or so will give you confidence into evaluating the card pool, evaluating your preferences, and you get to just do something that is for you and by you, and you get to show everyone your passion projects.
Yeah, we're excited to start this series and help newer players or even just older players that need a refresher on the art of deck building. And I know this is something that me and Devin are going to be reteaching ourselves too as we go through this series. I've been net decking a lot lately, and it's nice to use your creativity to build something new and interesting. I know next week I have an idea that I am really excited to share. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I think it's just goes so well with next week's topic as we talk about support Pokemon. So as a teaser, that's what we're going to be the next step in when we create decks. What are the supporting actors, the supporting pieces to make your archetype popular? So stay tuned, listen to next week's episode, and we'll go into that a little more. Um, but with that, anything else you want to add to this week's episode?
Nope, I am just excited for the new set in Pokemon Pocket that's supposed to drop on the 30th. Like I said, I have way too many pack hourglasses in that game, and I'm going to open up so many packs, and I cannot wait to see what's in them.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that next week since this is such a big thing. It's the first new actual legit set. The the one before was just a mini set. It was the special set if you want to put in TCG terms. So this is the new expansion. So we'll see how that plays out in that realm. But with that, thank you for listening. We're excited to see how you all go on this journey with us as we create more rogue decks together. But until then, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Have a great day, guys. Bye.